So please do. Please do engage. And with that, I kind of want to throw it out there and start generally. As you guys know, this is a chat about branding and brand equity building in a time where growth marketing is kind of the thing everyone is doing. And I want to throw this out, and I'm going to pick on Kat first because I've known her longer than I've known Becky. And Kat, generally, how do you think about that line between true brand building and kind of more hard fact-based growth marketing? And how does it impact the decisions you make and how you allocate budget and everything like that? Because I think folks here that tend to be on the smaller, more insurgent brand side really have some tough choices to make. And I think they'll benefit from your perspective on that.
Yeah. Well, thanks. And everyone, just so that we really level set here, Jeff and I worked together at Perfect Bar. He was my boss for 4 years. So I feel like this is a bit of like a pop quiz that I wish I could like study for coming from him, but nonetheless, happy to be here. So thinking of, really weighing how brand intersects with growth, I think the first thing, and I like hate to say this, but the first thing you need to understand is like, what are your goals? What are you trying to do here? And then of course, knowing your audience. So that's a big part of knowing who are you talking to? How should you be talking to them? How should you show up? How do they want to receive your messages? And then I think from there, you can really understand how your brand can grow versus and then how it supports growth. So if it's, purely an organic social side, right? Which helps that brand awareness, going to start filling that top of funnel. You can show up, maybe it's a little bit more fun. It's a quicker turn versus a paid, which talk about quick turn can be very quick turn, but there's a goal there. You want them to engage, you want them to click through, you want them to buy. So I think it all really has to do with how does your brand show up? What are your goals? Who are you talking to? And then you can kind of play within that sandbox and get creative there.
Oh, that's great. And Becky, would love your perspective on that as well, having touched so many iconic brands and walked that fine line between what's bold and beautiful and what works.
Yeah, well, obviously being a creative director, I'm going to be heavy on brand because that's my love, that's my passion. But I understand that there is a blend of the two. And I feel like so many times people will say, I want one or the other and just go heavy in on one or the other. And truly, I think, especially nowadays when we're talking with cost of acquisition rising and rising and rising for paid in particular, that you need that interaction to be valuable and memorable. So you get the first purchase, you get the click through, and then you get the second, and you get the love. And when you were talking about so many consumer packaged goods that are parody, for lack of a better term, I mean, to get real about it, like there is a lot of parity. And so when you're thinking about cost of acquisition and where is that meaningful for a consumer, a lot of times it's in the head, right? So making sure that impact is valuable. So I think it's a blend of the two, if that makes sense.
No, it really does. And I think something, and I've struggled with it myself, and Kat's going to laugh, right? How do you go about thinking about showing the consumer what's in it for them while staying true to your brand's legacy, story, origin, guidelines? Like, I think it's a fine line to walk, because I think internally folks care a lot, and externally it might be a heavier lift to get consumers to care. I'm curious how both of you think about approaching that.
Kat, you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So I think, and this is something we did a lot at Perfect Bar, is what you think to be true, or like, hey, this is our biggest value prop. You test it, you put it out there, and you realize, no, it's not. Like, this is not moving the needle at all. So it's being honest, like very honest with yourself, and like kind of being humble when what you think is going to really, for example, we as in Perfect Bar, as if I'm still there, I will always be part of Perfect Bar. Our brand story is the soul, right? This family story. It is a wild story for anyone who doesn't know, like someone will have to tell you, and for a long time, we thought that was like first touch point. That's what people cared. But what it really comes down to is it's not the first touch point. It's the third touch point. As Jeff was saying, it's like, what is that? What's in it for me? So always coming back to like, how does this really help the consumer? This lovely, endearing, wholesome family story doesn't really do much for them, but it is what they like to tell their friends after they've already realized that nutritionally this bar is superior, we like to think, and you know, it's in the refrigerator, which is the first of its kind. And did you know that there's this crazy family story? So that's how we kind of like think about it, is let go of your sacred cows, as Jeff would say, and be willing to A/B test. And then when things come back and actually like your hypothesis is not matched, be willing to pivot. And that's what we love about the digital world. You can pivot quick. So yeah, I think that would be let go of what you think you know, and let the consumers tell you.
Yeah. Shoot, I shouldn't have let you go first, because I was going to say some similar things. I was thinking about, yes, I mean, I think that's really it, is, you know, even from a brand standpoint, you know, brands evolve. You don't just stay exactly the same and then have this massive shift, because otherwise it's like, where did your old brand go? It's especially in startup phases, which I imagine the majority of our clients are sort of in that space, or mid-level at the very least, where you don't have the money for testing to start out with, right? So you kind of go in on your hunch, and then you get some money for testing, and then maybe that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, that didn't work, or social media just tells you naturally, which happens on occasion, and not being afraid to pivot, not being afraid to say, okay, we need to evolve this, that, or the other thing. You know, and I also think there's a lot to be said for people who have gut feelings. When people start, say, a juice company or a coffee company or whatnot, they are passionate about that. And I think they know their consumers incredibly well. And sometimes they will test and it will tell them otherwise. And I think there's a balance between going with your gut, because testing gets people in a left brain standpoint, where you're thinking about things, you're not feeling things, and consumers feel things, and they purchase on feel and thinking. It's a combination of the two things. And so to ignore one or the other, I think is kind of a mistake.
I think that's a really well articulated point. And I'd like to ask a question around it, because you think about the notion of something left-brained and some of the quantitative around a channel strategy. And then you think about something a little more right-brained around a communication strategy. How would you counsel some of these folks who are doing it all themselves around building that? Like, I know it's a chicken or the egg argument, but what comes first for you? And how do you get that down on paper and start thinking about implementing it?
For a strat, say that again. Sorry.
Think about your channel, right? Where you're going to show up, how much you're going to invest, how you're going to hit people, day parting, all the quantitative, and it's like communication strategy. What the hell are you going to tell them at each step in the funnel, right? So how does that intersection work for you? You just, like I said, you kind of hit on that bifurcation of left and right brain, and some of those are two kind of diverging things at times. And I'm just curious how you operationalize that, because I think a lot of folks on the call, or maybe they have one or two people helping out, or maybe they're doing it themselves and would just love some tips.
Yeah. Kat, you want to?
You want to take it. I don't want to upstream you.
Sure. No. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Yeah, you know, so for each channel, I think that's a complicated question, right? Because you have, and we've been talking about this a lot, where you're somewhat personalizing per channel a little bit, based on who's in that channel. So am I answering the question that you're asking?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to go all philosophical. Just trying to think about, right? Like you're a startup brand, and you're not starting from zero, because to your point, you're starting from gut intuition. You know about your consumer. You've got a plan. You've seen what others do. Are you sitting down and building out where you're going to show up, how you're going to talk to people? Like, just thinking about the staging. I would hope so. Yeah. So just for some of the folks who may not have done it before, I know you guys have both done it many times. How do you sequence that internally? Like, how do you think about getting that down on paper, building a framework, and then spending your first dollar on it?
Sure. So I think what we do is we look at our target consumer from a gut, but you know, and then we look at our brand. What do they stand for? What is their positioning in life and in their product and all these other things? And where do those things meet? What consumer needs do we meet? specific? Does the brand meet specifically? And then you show up in those terms. And that could be an attribute, non-GMO, organic, low calorie, whatever it is. Or it may be a person, like a hobby or something like that. Like every coffee drinker apparently likes archery. And so, I'm using this as an example that's not true. So let's talk about archery and our love for archery, as well as how coffee fits into that lifestyle, right? So, or they're energetic, and how do you get through your day? So I think it's
all starting with the persona. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can jump in, I also would think through for, anyone on the call who has maybe one or two, people on the team who's managing all consumer comms. Think also, like, it's okay if you're not everywhere, so pare it down to what is you're able to do and what your team can execute and what is within your budget. So if, you only have a couple people, organic social is free, like go there, build a brand there, develop your brand voice, show up consistently so that there is that scroll stop when people are like, oh, I know that this is Bobbie because it's Bobbie Green and it has that modern voice, and people recognize that. If you have a little bit of budget, put a little pay behind your social. We all know it's pay to play, and then eventually you want to be able to scale. Maybe as Series A comes in, Series B comes in, revenue starts happening, you can scale it to streaming or an out of home opportunity. Those like bigger spends that are true, more like brand, those don't always directly tie back to revenue. So I think just keeping it at the scale in which your team is able to execute and what you want to accomplish it. If it's an email acquisition, focus on email, get someone who to really help on that email. We know that email has payback, in terms of not only building brand, but also on that growth side. So I think it's just keeping it in, bringing it back, pairing it into what your team can actually execute, and know that you can always scale up, will help you in the long run.
Okay, awesome. So we've got some questions and they're related. I feel like you guys are lobbing us softballs. This is fantastic. So Piper asked what a good strategy would be to start testing with a limited budget. And very similarly, Ken asked, how do you decide how many data points to collect before deciding a campaign is or isn't working? So would you guys like to talk about that? I have a point of view on this myself as well, but I would want to throw it to the experts here.
I can jump in. I mean,
cool.
So I think, again, then I hate to like repeat it, but what is the goal of this? Is it a true brand awareness campaign? That's going to be, what are your engagement metrics? If it's a true, a direct response, it's going to probably be that ROI or that the revenue, right, that this brings in. So I think starting there will help in terms of figuring out which data points you're looking at. In terms of limited budget, I mean, we all know social can be super successful with a pretty limited budget. I think it's find your audience. Are they on YouTube? Are they on Instagram? Lord knows we're all entering into TikTok. It's relatively cheap to be in. You can win in TikTok right now. So I think those are good, kind of like easy places to start.
Yeah. The only add I would say is focus, and this maybe builds on your first comment, Kat, in terms of focus on a couple things versus trying to like spread it out too thin. I think consistency is critical, that you show up in whatever channel you're going to show up at in a consistent manner. So making sure you're hitting that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, well put. And I'd build really quickly on that with the notion of, especially with a limited budget, turn small bets into big bets, right? Like, not only have a plan on what you want to find out, but have an action standard on what you're going to do if it succeeds or what you're going to do if it fails, right? Because both of those are equally challenging problems to have. And I think that if you have a plan to scale, if you catch lightning in a bottle and you can do it quickly, that's great, as long as there's not a lot of fixed costs attached to it. And similarly, if you can, try to have a queue of new bets queued up that are all really, really small. And again, as little in fixed cost as possible. At this stage in the game, it's all about variable expense, right? You don't want to make huge bets and get over your skis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wasn't there that Dollar Shave Club thing? Do you guys know about this? Where it was like, so apparently they started with this video on YouTube that just went like viral bananas, and they had no product. And that's what they were like, oh, we got to make some product. Apparently that was, I don't know, when you're talking about that, it reminded me of it.
No, it's
Like
true.
Had the same experience. I feel like Poopery had the same experience. They had like the one
Oh,
viral
really?
YouTube video. Yeah. And that's kind of what did it. And to Jeff's point, so thinking if you're going to have that big brand moment, right? Like these YouTube videos that are maybe a 30-second, you're going to like blow a bunch of your marketing cash on this like brand moment, which I wouldn't suggest, but some people have success doing that if it's a great story. What are the follow-ups? Like what is stage 2, stage 3, stage 4? How are they moving down the funnel? Because if you do all this work up front and then you don't have anything ready for retargeting and you don't have anything for abandoned cart, which you don't have to do that, or something for a repurchase, like want to make sure that you have this steady drumbeat, even if it's 1 or 2 ads with a really low ad spend, it just really massages that relationship and brings them down through the funnel and back again. Let's not pretend that we want to then get them to repurchase and become loyalists. So, really bringing the, like refilling the funnel, even if it's with the same people.
Yeah, no, great points. And all of this testing not only takes budget if you're going on a paid channel or people to do it, right? It takes creative and it takes a number of assets. And this can be a big burden on a small company, especially if you're externalizing creative and you're one of the small clients, right? So I'm curious, I'd love to get, and I think, Becky, I just start with you on external, right? Like, what are your thoughts on external creative strategy versus production and how a small brand can really start bringing things to life?
Yeah. Real quick before I get to that, just for people's knowledge, and I don't know if you guys know this, but most of the clients that we work with or we've worked with in the past have not done a ton of testing. And it's suddenly over probably the last 3 years increased a lot. That may be because of the clients that we're working with. I don't know, but there have been a lot of people that I've worked with that have not done any testing. So I'm going to say that first and foremost, if people are like freaking out that they have to spend a lot of money on testing, because it can be expensive. To your question now, of external versus internal creative, honestly, I think it's a question of budget. Obviously, that's part of it. But I think in an ideal situation, I think working them in tandem is helpful. I always think having, if everyone is part of the company, then is there someone to kind of maybe not be a yes person and maybe give a different perspective and give another checkpoint, like, hey, have you thought of this, from a fresh eye, from someone who has not been with the company for anywhere from a month to 10 years or whatever. I think that is helpful. Also having a little bit of distance, so there's a little bit of independent thinking happening between the two, I think is helpful. But then there's always needs, and there's a ton of collaboration that needs to happen from an internal team. There are needs all the time that come up for not only from a budget standpoint, but from a creative standpoint. That I think an internal team can really, really help with, to have someone who has that base knowledge. When you say you need ABC, social media, rendering, whatever it might be, they're ready for it and they know the brand. They don't need to be brought up to speed in terms of that. So I think that's an ideal situation for sure.
Great. Kat, any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, so this is kind of maybe indirectly answering your question, but something, just thinking of like a how-to advice. So something that's actually been really successful for us at Bobbie is utilizing our customers, directly reaching out to them and asking them like, hey, we're going to be in the Bay Area. We need families, we need babies, and being in the baby space, it can be a very sensitive space of just using random babies. Are they actually on Bobbie? Are they not? Do we want to show their faces? So allowing our customers to kind of opt in and be part of this community is relatively cheap. It's like a gift card and product, and they're so excited. To your point, Becca, they know the brand. They feel like they're part of this. They reshare on their social when they see that they're on the website banner, like on a social post for us. So it's a relative, like quick and easy way. We found a local photographer. They, did the edits for us. We were able to go and on my cell phone, asking them, like taking testimonial videos on my cell phone. That it's like a pretty quick, like lo-fi production, but that kind of content does really well. So that's a quick way too. And it kind of creates that flywheel of community that you're trying to do as you're trying to build a brand.
That's fantastic. And thinking further around the scrappiness, right? Like to that point, not every activation needs to be big, bold, beautiful, high production value creative, right? Like, and additionally, just getting out there and inserting yourself properly in today's conversations, albeit some are a little more challenging than others, right? Is another way to do it. And thinking about that and thinking about things that are relevant, I think, Kat, I got to put you on the spot here a little bit, by virtue of the baby formula shortage. Like, how do you think about positively inserting your brand's voice into something that's so touchy while maintaining credibility and even potentially capitalizing on it from an equity standpoint?
Yeah, it's for anyone watching the headlines, it's every other news channel is talking about this formula shortage, which is a very interesting place to be in. Never did we think baby formula would be like the talk of the town, but it is, and it's a really scary time. And to that point of, we've really prided ourselves on the brand marketing of being very transparent, both with our partners, with our ingredients, with, internally, what is our, we just did this whole parental paid leave policy campaign and bringing people inside, a little peek behind the veil. So when it comes to this, we reached out to every one of our subscribers first via email, and then also put something on our social, essentially saying like, we're capped. Like, we can't bring any more customers. We are not outside of this formula shortage. The, 30% of the category got removed off shelf with one fell swoop from one recall, and we're all pretty strapped. And we essentially sent out this email saying, but when you subscribe to Bobbie, we subscribe to you. Like, your little pile of formula, it has your little Post-it name on it. It's ready for you. Don't worry. And it was a labor of love writing that letter that went out via email, like I said, and then also on social. And what the love we got from it, even from people who aren't customers, like, dang it, I really want to be a Bobbie customer, but this just reinforces how much you guys take care of your people. Like, I can't wait to be part of the Bobbie family. And then, of course, our subscribers are just loyalists forever. They were so excited. They feel safe with us. They feel trust with us. They feel like, oh, you are a team of moms because you wrote this letter, which is exactly what I needed to hear, because I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to feed my child. So, really leaning and leading with vulnerability and knowing our customer of like, what do we want to hear in a time right now? And that has just helped us build this brand. And it also has kind of created this like FOMO exclusivity around getting in. And now we have a wait list that is overwhelmingly large. So we'll see like how we're able to open that back up. But it's been a very pretty incredible exercise of brand during growth.
That's fantastic. Becky, having seen so many brands put their best foot forward, do you have any favorite examples of either great creative or timely and relevant insertion into the conversation you can share with the group for inspiration?
For shortages and things like that?
No, just anything, right? Like, you think almost even like a B school case study is Oreo during the blackout of the Super Bowl, right? Just anything that's these folks might find inspiration from that's relevant and well done. If you're on the spot, I can move on. I've got other stuff, but I'm curious if anything sticks in your mind.
No, I mean, the only thing I would probably say is that there were several moments in Suja's career or our career with Suja, I guess, where there was this idea of spreading happiness, and they took the juices into the subways and gave those out to people randomly just to set their day in a positive fashion. And I've seen a couple people take advantage of certain experiential opportunities like that pre-pandemic, of course. But yeah.
No, that's great. All right, we got another question. Thank you. I was about to poke you guys for it. So from Ken, speaking of vulnerability, it can get political in general. How do you guide your leaders about taking a stand on social issues and staying true to your brand while not turning some customers off?
Wow, Ken.
Man. Yeah, Ken, you're my new favorite. You lobbed Kat and I a softball here because we lived this at Perfect Bar. So I'm going to kick it to you, Kat, because you did a fantastic job both externally and with the team internally, who was equally as passionate.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, mostly you panic call your boss. Is this right, Jeff? What do you think? I don't know. Should we hit send? That's like mostly what was going on. But I can use both what we did at Perfect Bar, but Bobbie, for example, just most recently, I mean, as of last week, the leak, Supreme Court verdict comes out. We are a family brand. We are all about options. We are all about choice. We are all about empowering moms mostly, but parents to make the right choice for them and their family. So we put out a statement, which is really what we did was essentially, it's on our Instagram. We essentially, our boss, our founder, sent a Slack message to the whole team that morning. And just, again, like knows who's on her team, and that for us, it was something that was like pretty emotional. And anyways, we shared it. We got a lot of love. We got a lot of hate, I would say, of not love. And it is hard and it is trying. And I will say, you need to have a brand stance ready to go. You need to have standard responses ready to go. You need to arm your CX team and your social team and give them a break that they do not carry the burden for what this is about to do for your company, because it can be gnarly out there, quite frankly. And I would just make sure that it aligns with your brand, and be very careful and be very smart of the moments that you choose to wade into, because if you're not ready to get into all the waters, you need to just be aware of that, because there's going to be another cause or another issue that gets brought up, and someone internally is going to be really fired up for this one, or your consumers are going to be really fired up for this one. And you are going to be expected to show up in the same way with the same energy for every single cause. And that's not to say that there can't be and shouldn't be more Ben and Jerry's in the world, but we aren't all Ben and Jerry's. So just want to be mindful. What are those causes for you? And, Bobbie chose to speak up here because it is very on brand for us. We were personally fired up about it. Our audience was personally fired up about it, but we're only a year 2 brand. Would it be the same a few years from now when we're fully a national brand and we are beholden to all these investors? And there's a lot of other partners, we have a lot of small farm investors or small farmers for our dairy. Like, do they believe the same thing we believe? Not sure. So I think you just need to, and here's the other takeaway: write what you think you're going to write, go have lunch, and then come back and reread it, and bring everyone back into the room again and look at it one more time, and just be very sure you're ready to go.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that, is again, really thinking about your brand and what it stands for. I've seen people or brands comment on or take stances on issues that are very of the moment, but are largely irrelevant to the brand. I guess that's a choice, right? Because you are sharing then something that's sharing something about the people behind the brand. But I think it pulls you off course a little bit. In this particular circumstance, absolutely made sense to make some sort of a statement. And I applaud you for doing that. That's not easy. And making that choice is tough. And you do have to be very delicate, and taking a step away is smart.
Yeah, I think those are both just fantastic answers. And I think I'd like to add really quickly to it. One is recognize the difference between internal and external communications, right? Like how you carry yourself within the 4 walls of your organization and how you espouse the values of your organization should absolutely go hand in hand with the brand. But the way it manifests itself, especially in a way that consumers are going to see, is it's going to be different, right? And then I think you also need to be prepared for what comes next, because these issues tend to burn really hot and they may not last long, but they will come back. And if you take a strong stance on something, especially if you're in support or speaking out against it, invariably some consumer will come back asking for receipts. They're going to say, that's great, you said this, what have you done? Yeah. Because if you're not prepared to thematically either externalize it via social or by virtue of volunteering or donation, right? Like if you're not doing something, if you're just saying something because everyone else is, it's going to do a lot more harm than good. And I would prepare internally to be able to ask if the random person asks you either via consumer contact or social media. I think once you put any sort of stimulus out there in terms of a position, you need to be prepared to take the corresponding actions, or you're going to get yourself in more trouble than it was worth.
Yeah, I agree. And one other thing to consider is your team. You know, for us, last week was seemingly a no-brainer. We're from the coast, we're all moms, we're like a startup from the Bay Area. Like, it seems the assumption, and I think it was a pretty fair assumption, is that the team all felt the same way, but that may not be the same for every single issue or cause. And as much as we all want to grow our brands, you know, you can't grow a brand with consumers if your team internally is unhappy. So there's a bit of a gut check there too, of making sure that if you're going to speak for the brand, or the brand is going to speak for, you know, the people who work for it, make sure that it, you know, lands well for the team too, you know?
No, well said. So I want to throw it out there to the group here. You've got some great expertise sitting on the Zoom. Any pain points, any issues you guys have, be it day to day or more high level thinking around creative, please drop them in the chat, or we're just going to start telling some more stories here as we pass the halfway point of this forum.
Or I'm going to just start calling people out. Ari with the coconut, talk about brand. Everyone recognizes coconut Colwyn's out there. I think you guys were the first to like really lean into those emojis, and now you're known for it. So I think I applaud you. People recognize Coconut Cold. Now I'm seeing you guys all over the place. So just going to make you jump right in here too.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. I think that, I mean, I'm learning a lot about just how relevant a simple, you know, icon can be. And in our case, that pink flamingo just really took off. And, you know, I have a shirt that I bought at Target, and it's covered in those pink flamingos. It's not like we invented that, you know, it just, when you apply that to something like a jar of coconut yogurt, it works because you don't associate one with the other. And that iconography just jumps right out at you. We're, you know, for the brand, I can tell you, we're entering sort of a stage now where we want to create something that's even more identifiable as being owned by us. And we're, you know, currently going through a rebranding process. So we're creating our own iconography, our own, you know, fonts and things of that nature, because we want to evolve this and take it to the next level. Instead of using, you know, your standard, you know, emojis, we want to, because now I'm seeing that all over the place.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone's just sort of using emojis, and now is the time for us, at least, to try and create our own visual language.
Yeah, I love that.
No, that's really cool. Definitely a great way to break through the clutter. And Becky, you mentioned it earlier about rising acquisition costs. And I mean, I'm living it, Kat. I'm sure you're living it in that space as well. What do you guys think defines breakthrough creative these days? Because everyone kind of has the same blueprints, the same archetypes, right? Like the same production values to a certain extent. If you look across channels, nothing is terribly thumb stopping anymore these days. What can these guys do to have the best chance of breaking through?
I would say the best thing that you can do is behave consistently. One of the brands that I love, that actually I have right here, it's not a brand that we created, but I mean, I think a lot of people may or may not be familiar with this brand called Vacation. If you have not looked it up, I highly recommend you do so. They probably have a lot of money. They have like a Spotify channel. They have their own, if you look at their website, it is amazing. Everything goes off this 80s vibe of extra tan, probably a lot of cigarettes, maybe, I don't know, you know, summertime things that people do, and everything is consistent. I purchased, because I had to try it, I purchased, I think, a t-shirt and these air fresheners, which by the way smell terrible, but all air freshener things smell terrible, right? So it went with the brand, but the email came through and it looked like a fax. the website itself has this flashy, DeLoreans and silly oiled up people, but it behaves the same every time. And then it says, and then it had like an ad that you might have seen and in a print ad, like if you imagine sort of the Apple ads from way back when, if you guys know what those are, with a lot of copy and serify type, and everything behaved the same way, talked about vacation the same way. So I think consistency, right? Consistency in the way you behave is so challenging. You marketing people, I applaud you, because that is one hell of a thing, especially nowadays when you have someone doing your YouTube and a different person doing your brand identity and a different person doing your web and another one doing your advertising. To make that all work in sync is beyond difficult, and very few people do it well. And I think, to that point about picking your channels wisely, is really important, because if you can get them to behave the same way, even if it's just three different channels, whatever they are, if they're behaving the same way, you're pushing the brand forward in a way that's meaningful and memorable, and hopefully will get an audience, will find its audience. So that's what I would say.
That vacation, it's like hell of nostalgia is a hell of a drug, right? Like that, the emotion of nostalgia. I mean, it was a huge success for us at Perfect Bar too, like quite frankly, if any of you guys have had a peanut butter Perfect Bar, it kind of tastes like it's exactly like honey and peanut butter, which is what it is. It's like that spoonful of peanut butter as a kid, right? There's like these ingredients that and we tap into that nostalgia. And I think vacation, to your point, it did that really well. Jeff, what was the question?
It was around how to break through, but that was a fantastic answer. I want to move on because it sparked another question. We can keep this thing rolling. So you brought up how many people, internal and external, Becky, can touch a brand, right? And Kat, this for you too. Agency management is no mean feat, especially when you have a lean team. So you can go the big P&G way and have thousands of brand positioning documents and write the tightest brief in the universe, or you can, to your point before, have kind of some founder gut. For these folks who need to operationalize this, how would you suggest they go about managing these agency stakeholders and ensuring that level of consistency and continuity and brand guideline adherence?
Mm-hmm. I will go short because I'm sure, Becky, you have like a great answer here. My biggest one is get a brand book. Make one, get one internal, get everyone to agree upon it, it's just one of those things you could pass off to the agencies. So if there's a ton of agencies all touching things, which Bobbie, that's happening to us right now, at least there's one source of truth, and this is going to be a very unpopular opinion for brand marketers. Don't tell my boss, but in the paid side, the growth side need to be able to play. You need to be able to test, give them that brand book, but then let them push it a little bit, see what works. There needs to be to that point of like what breaks through. It might be the weird thing. Jeff and I have this notorious ad, which actually I'm not going to claim it because it's so ugly. It was Jeff's doing, and it was consistently a top performer month over month over month. It literally was just round 2. Repurchase round 2. It was so tragic, and it performed over and over to the point where we put it on a mug for Jeff because it was so bad. But that's just an example of like the growth team needs to have space to grow and flex and try. Give them the right colors, get them the right fonts, make them play within, like I said, within a certain sandbox, but then let them go.
Yeah. And I would also say with the brand guidelines, because this has happened to us a lot of times, where we will get a brand guidelines and then we'll see that it's not being followed. So that's a brand manager job. And that's why I say that job is so hard, because it is very, very difficult to make sure that not only is there a brand guidelines, but that you're actually all holding hands and moving forward with it. Because creative people like us, we want to create stuff and we want to make new things. And it's so hard to stick to rules, and that's our job, right? So making sure that we're all doing that is so critical.
Yeah, that's great.
I think also weighing your time and your effort and your money on the deliverable and how long it's going to live out in the world. Like this, if it's a paid side and it's an ad that may only live for 48 hours because you have the next one coming behind it. And if it's a bottom performer, it turns off. You don't need to spend all the time and the money. Good enough is good enough. Get it up, get it out, see how it goes, and iterate. So I think that's just a little addition there.
For sure.
It's a great transition to the question we got here from Trish around how defined on the brand voice and tone have you guys been at both Perfect and Bobbie?
Yeah. I would like to say pretty defined. I don't know if everyone would say that internally. It is something that I enjoy. I came up through copywriting, through content, and now over it. So that the tone and the voice is kind of I would like to think it's kind of my baby. But that being said, we're only year 2 company. So there's often times that we're like, we've never been here before. What would Bobbie say about this? So we do kind of, in our brand book, we kind of talk about like what our tone, what our voice is. And we kind of like to, at least for Bobbie, we like to liken it to being that mom friend or that friend in the mom text thread who always makes you laugh, but always keeps it real and is always very supportive. Like, you got this, so if I come back to that, like, okay, what would I text my friends right now? And that's kind of, which is a ridiculous litmus test for a brand tone, but that's the reality of it, so we constantly come back and recheck it. Like, hey, is there a moment where we can inject brand here? Is there can we make this a brand moment, or is it just a transactional email that just like needs to get out the door?
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that specifically is like when you're thinking about your brand. So some of the, like, I would say probably, and I'm guessing here, but I might be wrong, but Perfect Bar was probably a little more broad because you had a broader audience, right? So it can't be as clearly defined because your target is a little bit more broad. The more specific you can be with your consumer, if your consumer is pretty targeted, you can get real specific and you can talk to them like we speak the same language, we know each other. If we're talking to people that are, and that's why we try to find a target consumer that has a little bit of specificity to it. So we can speak to them in a way that feels natural and feels on par. Because if we're talking to McDonald's, which is my other toy that I'll share with you today, because it's just fun. Who needs this? Come on. Anyway, I'm distracted. Then you're talking to everyone and you're saying, I'm loving it. And you pay millions and millions of dollars and you're still selling burgers. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's, you say the job for brand managers hard. Creatives have an incredibly difficult job, especially because there's a huge amount of subjectivity. So you think about having all of these defined guidelines, being the arbiter of whether or not a piece of creative adheres to it can be a challenge at times, right? That amount of subjectivity can really muddy the waters for sure. So I think doing your best is incredibly important, and not being out of left field is also incredibly important. But I think there's wiggle room, as Kat mentioned, especially on the growth side, because there has to be. There's, for example, there's only so many protein bars in the world, right? Like there's only so many ways one can talk about chocolate and peanut butter together. It's really difficult to break through that clutter.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask one more time for pain points, and then I'm gonna start making stuff up myself here. Anyone? Don't be shy, guys. There's like 8 people. Here we go. All right, would love more stories, examples of how to show vulnerability, not only through social issues. I know that's a great way to connect with customers. So yeah, I'm sure you guys have some favorite activations in that frame. Would love to hear them.
I can jump in. So
Sure.
Bobbie, we're an infant formula company. For anyone who's ever been close to the experience of feeding a baby, how intimate it is and how emotional it is. So really Bobbie has grown and continues to grow through our brand marketing of our storytelling around feeding a baby. It is damn hard. It never goes how you expect it to go. Your baby's supposed to be this size, no this size, no this milestone. Am I feeding enough? Am I producing enough? Is formula poisoning my child? There's all these additional layers of what it takes to feed a baby. And we did this activation called Feeding Confessionals, where we essentially were with I think it was like 6 moms over the course of the first 6 to 9 months of their, they were of their postpartum experience feeding their baby. And we had them self-record and put together this whole video series essentially of all these moms. And at the end of the day, the result was like, oh, this is really hard. This is really emotional. This is not going according to how I thought it was going to go. And that has allowed us as a brand, we really learned from that. And that has informed our tone of like, okay, we need to be vulnerable. We need to speak from like, we are moms too. We have been through it. So whether it's a social post or email of when we directly talk to our customers or our inserts, we do different postcard inserts every month. The one that continues to be reshared and reshared is one side of the postcard just says, if no one's told you today, you're the shit. And I can't tell you how many moms have taken a picture of that, put it on social, which then, of course, helps with the social proof. But it's because every mom needs to hear that. Like opening this box of formula that society tells you is the worst thing to give to your child. You open it up and the brand is telling you that you're doing a good job and that you're the shit. Like that's what a mom needs to hear in that moment.
Yeah, I have a question for you on that. It's just so fascinating to me. I don't even know if this is allowed. I'm just chiming in here in the chat. Is like, having that tone of like, you're the shit, it takes a lot of say, hey, we might alienate some people, be offended by this, right? In the book, when you describe like your tone, you're saying, hey, we're okay to be edgy. We're okay to use these expletives. These are approved. These are not. Like, how deep do you go in saying like, this is what you can and can't do? And is that just like, just try it and see what works?
Yeah. Well, we love poop talk at Bobbie. That's like also, if you've ever fed a baby, the poop really matters. So it's something that like is on brand because we're like formula, it's like the poops are the same as on breast milk. Like that is a thing that parents ask. So, like the play on shit is something that we do all the time. We had 4 billboards across the Bay Area and they said, let's talk shit. And people up with, a little star, people loved it. But yeah, that is, on the other side, we did a postcard once where we wrote a haiku and we had 2 kind of lopsided lemons. And the haiku was all about like, not all lemons work. Like if yours don't work, that's okay. And some people were pretty offended by that of like, my lemons are fine. So sometimes it is, that was like, okay, let's cut off the print production on that one. Let's rewrite a postcard. What's a new one we can do? Where on the other side, people loved it. So it is a little, sometimes it can be.
The hard part of brand, in my opinion, is like where you say, oh, we're not going to listen to the noise, the 2% of noise on the end.
Yep.
Or you just keep responding to, then you're playing like pinball. It's just like.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, go ahead, jump in.
No. I mean, we had, we've had clients in the past and every once in a while you come across something and someone will say, that looks phallic. We're like, okay, goes bye-bye. We'll see you later. We had someone say, that looks phallic. I love it. Let's go for it. And so it literally can run the gamut. And yes, we push those buttons and we have those conversations ahead of time. So we sort of know what we're going into. Some are less touchy than others. Baby formula brands can get touchy. If we're talking about candy, probably not super touchy, but could be, I don't know, depending upon who you're talking to. So you have to have those discussions ahead of time, just a little bit, so people sort of know where those parameters are. And especially the ones that want to be edgy, because someone's going to be even edgier than that. And then they're going to say, oh, wait, that's way too much. So if they come out saying we want to be edgy, then you go deep and you really figure out where that is, where those.
I think you kind of flex your brand muscles. I'll be honest there, you get our internal saying right now is sorry, not sorry 2022. Cause it's kind of that, like, we don't want to apologize anymore. Like, this is it. This is the voice. Our audience loves it. If, and like stay focused on the people who want to love you, right? They're going to come back. They're going to tell their friends about you. Like, those are the people with the high LTV. Those are the people who are really going to help serve the company. There's always going to be haters. There's always going to be noise. And if they don't want to love us, go ahead and leave, because there's literally a wait list of someone who wants to join on, So I think that's it. All that being said, it's easier said than done. It could be hard. You need to like flex flex the brand muscles a little bit, but then you just get a little bit stronger each time. And then you kind of feel like, okay, we'll pull back here. Let's try something else.
Awesome. We got a really good question in chat. I think this will be something both of you have a point of view on. So how do you go about changing the voice of a brand without alienating the loyalists? A change is due to new ownership and signaling a new brand to our constituents. That is a hard and very meaty question.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would ask, how many loyalists do you have? Because if there's 10, then there's room for movement. If there are 20,000 that are loyalists, then you think about it, and those changes might be more minimal. You know, we did work for Lily's Sweets, which is a chocolate brand. It's low sugar. The people who were loyalists on that brand were maniacs. I mean, they loved Lily's. They posted about Lily's. They talked about Lily's. And our reaction from the people who came to us and said, we want to refresh this brand, was don't F it up, because their sales were like going up and up and up and up and up. And so those changes were evolutionary. You know, and each situation is completely different, but you want to look at how many loyalists you have, how vocal are they, how can you bring in new people? That's really, really critical. So I think understanding where their loyalty is really, really critical, and hopefully expanding upon that. In most cases, I would say that brand voice tends to be not something that's utilized as heavily as I think it could be. So not knowing what this brand is and not knowing who your loyalists are, I would say you probably have room for movement, because if you can imagine a specific person speaking in the way that your brand is when you read that copy, then that's pretty dialed in. If you can't imagine that person, then you probably have room for movement.
Yeah, and maybe there's a world where you can speak directly to these 2,000 people, like, hey, we recognize that you're a loyalist. Things are going to change here, and you can, send them an email, again, make them feel like they're really part of the brand, make them send those 2,000 people a survey. How do you want to see the brand change? What would you want to have be part of this? Give them a voice in it, whether you execute on what they say or not. It makes them feel like they're part of it. And just kind of an anecdotal about staying too close to loyalists I would say at the detriment of a brand growing is, way back when I worked at Prana here in San Diego, and our head of marketing had this story of, she came from LL Bean when LL Bean was a relatively like young, cool, hit brand and people were into it. And she said that their marketing stayed so close to their loyalists, and they kept doing a catalog as things were going digital. They stayed catalog, and they stayed so close to the loyalists that then LL Bean, as they knew it, is the LL Bean of today, which is, the older demographic. They essentially aged up and out with their consumers, and maybe they're very happy now, and perhaps they're, meeting quarterly goals, which maybe they are, but it is a departure from what they originally set out to be, because they were so focused on staying true to their loyalists rather than focusing on the new customers or the brand that they want to be.
Yeah, to that end, I think weighing the risk is going to be difficult for anyone that's really close to the brand, especially I see 2,000 loyalists, so it's a smaller startup brand, right? And for founders who live, breathe, eat, sleep their brand and know it backwards and forwards, they tend to overestimate how much mind share truly is sitting in a consumer's head, right? So it's like, if the magnitude of the change isn't jarring, right, from like something that's wholesome and friendly to something edgy, like Becky was mentioning, right, it may not even be all that noticed. And I think that's a really hard thing too. Like, you think about the whole concept of wear out. When you're living this every day as a brand marketer, you get sick of stuff. Consumers aren't. They see it once, twice, 3, 4 times, and it hasn't even worn in yet. So I think that's a consideration that you can absolutely make when addressing an issue like this.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yep.
Cool. Well, we're about at time. Any last questions before we break? No, awesome. Well, huge thank you, Becky, Kat. Great conversation, and thank you guys for participating. I know we had to drag some of it out of you, but really appreciate the engagement.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank
Take
you
care.
guys. And I just want to quickly say a big thank you to Jeff for moderating the discussion. Jeff always does a great job at moderation, and you're such an expert, a subject matter expert in the field. So thank you, Jeff. Thank you to Kat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, take
We'll
care,
see you
guys.
guys maybe July, August, we'll do another one of these specific to marketing. So we'll see you then.
Cool.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Good job, Jeff. It was great. I'm staying.